o'clock. Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. It's 11. It should be, so.
Right. So commissioners, this issue is, I know it's been going on for quite a while. We've had a lot of meetings on it, but what specifically I would like to address with you is basically, I think I've got enough information to the ultimate question of this road that Joe Schmaus has asked the commission to recognize as county road. And because there's a lot of roads that are in this area, which we'll talk about, I'll refer to this road as Daniothe North. So if that's the road we're talking about, I don't think it's a county road, but that's the road that Joe Schmaus is specifically addressing. I've just called it that for convenience because there's so many other roads we'll deal with. So when we started out, the document, this map up here, it was provided by Mr. Schmaus, prepared by a surveyor. He was referencing a petition from 1887 with a bunch of citizens. The lead citizen was named John Daniothe, and we might be butchering the name, but so that's why we've called it that. Joe was telling us that based on this description, he believed that the road began up here in so Township 9 North, Range 1 East in Section 6, which would put it right on the shore of Canyon Ferry Reservoir, the western shore, and then it went in a south and westerly direction through some BLM land, through what was McMaster Ranch, potentially through the Cox Ranch, and then connect down near the highway with what we've all been calling Red Hill Road. There was also a second road which he referred to as Leffler Road, and that's what it was called, as Leffler Road, which he believed was another option of a road that went through section 1314 in Township 9 North 1 West and went north up into this McMaster BLM area and eventually linked up with the Canyon Ferry Reservoir shore. The reason that matters is because Mr. Schmaus has an inholding of an old mining claim in Section 1 of Township 9 North, Range 1 West. Oh, he's here. All right, well, I'll pause then. We weren't sure if you're coming. You can sit up here if you want, or you can wait till I'm done.
I'll wait until you're done.
Okay, I'm just doing an overview. So the idea was that he presented way back when that either Leffler Road or Daniothe or a combination of them would give him access, or at least a public road, a county road close by his property, and then he could work on access with the BLM. Initial review on that, I came back and gave you a recommendation that first of all, the Daniothe Road that was in the first part of the Daniothe petition is currently underwater in Canyon Ferry Reservoir, because when you look at a road in very old records, you've got to use something to figure out that course. And so what we did is we looked at the start point, and they mentioned a specific residence and homestead as the end point. And we found through the BLM records that residence was south and east of the Daniothe Ranch, and that meant the road traveled along basically the foothills of the Missouri River on the west side, and it came down south closer to Townsend. That area is now flooded. That road was covered up, and so you all agreed, and I think Mr. Schmaus agreed, that first part of that Daniothe petition, that road is underwater and is not accessible. The Leffler Road, and I'll come back to the second part of the Daniothe petition because that's really been the big issue for the last several months. The second road was the Leffler Road, and the Leffler Road was a county road that was petitioned in Township 9 North, Range 1 West, and it mentioned specifically going in sections 13 and 14, and it mentions going past certain properties that were all in this area, and I didn't find, and I don't know that there's been anything that's been found showing any evidence that it went north of the halfway point, or the midsection line, on the section line between sections 13 and 14. And so without any evidence of it going farther, that would be the end point of the Leffler Road. Mr. Schmaus disagrees with this. He says that the verbiage of that indicates that there was a desire that that road would go farther through what was at one point basically open range, or public domain, was obviously later settled and became part of the McMaster Ranch. That road later, in those latest documents I have, as well as the map that I referenced in my last memo from Mr. Schmaus, it does show that that key portion between sections 13 and 14 was closed and abandoned. So the concern is that even if Leffler Road did ultimately go all the way north, a chunk of that road is no longer accessible for anyone to use, so you can't get to the north piece if the middle piece is gone. That leaves us really with the third and most contentious road that we've discussed for months now. In the Danny Authy petition, it mentions specifically, first in the petition, that they want a road that basically connects with, and the language I think matters. So if you look at my memo from 21 September, so the Danny Authy petition requests the following. And what happened is they mixed in the petition, they talked about several different things, and then when they were done in the viewer's report, they were broken into two distinct roads. So I'll just kind of focus on where I think we have relevant information. They wanted a road commencing at a point near the Missouri River on the county line between Jefferson and Lewis and Clark counties, which is that northern part of the road we already talked about. Then up the valley so as to connect with the Red Hill Road, which leads to the Spokane House. Then following the Red Hill Road with such deviations as may deemed necessary and connecting with the Beaver Creek and Helena Road at any convenient point near the Spokane House. So a couple things you got to know right off the bat. First of all, this road that's marked on here as Red Hill Road is really universally known as Red Hill Road through a lot of old references and even more recent references. Secondly is Spokane House. Spokane House was down here. There's been a number of possible locations thrown out, but we believe it was in section 16, which is, if you think about like the Lazy HM area subdivision, that's roughly in section 16. And then secondly, it talks about the Beaver Creek Road connecting with the Helena Road. So in looking at all those landmarks, and then going to the viewer's report, which is basically what happens is the county commission gets a petition to make sure it's in order. Then they appoint viewers, usually 3 citizens, to go and basically establish what that route would look like. They bring back a report to the county commission and say, we did it, here's the road that with a course that would work. And then if the commission accepts it and orders a road, you now have a county road. And sometimes, as we see in 1887, some of those descriptions were based on what everyone understood as common landmarks at the time, but not necessarily something that now, over 100 years later, we can look at. Here's what they said. They said, we located the road running over the Red Mountain, commencing about 1/2 mile south of Ed Durnan's house, then running west across the Red Hill and connect with the Helena Bozeman Road near the residence of Patrick Moran. So we find Patrick Moran's residence is also over in this section 16 area near Spokane House. In fact, there's going a long story there about the halfway house and Spokane House, and Moran, I believe, owned the Spokane House at one point. But then secondly, we have this residence of Ed Durnan. And where is the residence of Ed Durnan? Well, we have this old historic map. I got to figure out where it is. We call it the pirate map because it's kind of a hand-drawn work of art. But it puts Ed Durnan's residence, it's Exhibit 18 in your packet, it puts Ed Durnan's residence, one of his residences, okay, he had property way over here, which we'll talk about, along the Missouri River, and then he also had some property way over by what later became Winston. But the Ed Durnan residence appears to be in Section 8 of Township 9 North, Range 1 East. Okay, so that's now currently underwater, right? So it would be over here somewhere. But that location of that residence from that map provided by Mr. Schmaus, it meets the description of of the Red Hill Road, okay? Because if you go about a half mile south, and there are several maps, there's another map here we can look at in a second, and then you go over the Red Mountain, and there's a lot of historical references in your packet where the Red Mountain is clearly, we're clearly talking about this feature right here. There's another much later reference when they're talking about this road, and they specifically say this road is coming down off of the Red Hill. So it shows you high elevation here, and when they say we're coming off the Red Mountain, we're referring to this. I haven't found anything in the record that says Red Mountain is way up here, and that matters, and I'll talk about it in a second. So that means, I think what it means is that that second part of the Daniothy petition established Red Hill Road, which is marked on this map. Interesting thing about that is that the surveyor that did this map for Joe Schmelz thought that as well at the time, because that's specifically what he indicates on this map that he did. So then, really what it came down to was Mr. Schmelz's counter argument that that road had already previously been established. They wouldn't be establishing Red Hill Road as a county road when it already existed as a county road. And so this is a 1950 BLM map, and the reason this is helpful is because it shows the layout prior to the Canyon Ferry Reservoir being fully flooded. It doesn't show necessarily how it was all the way back in 1887 because Lake Sewell had kind of grown in since then. However, it does give us a very good indication of what we're doing. So Mr. Schmelz came to us, and this was prior to the May meeting, and he said, that road, Red Hill Road, was established in 1885 by a petition, which I'll talk about in a second. And therefore, if it was already established in 1885, it wouldn't have been established in 1887. So that leaves only the option of this, what I call Daniothy North, as being established as part of that, the second road for the Daniothy North petition. And if we didn't have and to meet that though, instead of going a half mile south of Ed Durnan's house to start that road, you'd have to go one half or maybe a mile north of Ed Durnan's house to start that road. And then Red Hill wouldn't be down here, it would be up here. And this road, if it already existed, that wouldn't be the establishment. So here's a couple things on this. I went back to the petition, and the petition specifically asks them to locate a road along the Red Hill Road and then deviating from wherever was practical. Here's what I found in extensive research. There are many times when they are establishing a county road, but the road already existed. And I referenced a couple specifically in the memo. And there is a petition I put in here one time where they said, we petitioned that you declare this a county road, and it's already in good condition and meets standards. You don't have to do any maintenance to it. It appears to me that Red Hill Road was already established and used by the public, but it hadn't been declared a county road. And that's why they were using it as saying basically follow this road or deviate from it as you need to be. Secondly, and on that, there is a map from 1867 or 1869 that, and it's in your packet here. I'll see if I can find it. Exhibit 13. That shows that road. So that road was being used and existed as of 1869, but hadn't been established as a county road. So Mr. Schmelz says, you've got that all wrong. That is the road that was established in 1885 by a petition, and he refers to it as the Middle Ferry memo. Okay? The problem with that is that's not where Middle Ferry is. This whole thing came down to where is Middle Ferry or Blake's Ferry. Okay? It really comes down to Blake's Ferry. Where is Blake's Ferry? Because the 1885 petition that established the road off of Blake's Ferry, which Mr. Schmaus says is Red Hill Road, that location matters. So I kept asking him, well, where are you getting this, that this is Blake's Ferry? He said, well, there's only 3 ferries, boom, boom, and boom, and they're laid out. Those handwritten deals on the BLM land, those are Mr. Schmaus's handwriting. So here's what I found. Let me finish. You'll have plenty of chance. So
Point of order.
here's what I found.
His, and then we'll come to you.
Turns out there's a ton of information out there on ferries from the upper Missouri, it'd be the upper Missouri. So exhibit 15 that I gave you is this. Turns out there's this treatise out there by a guy named John Stoner, who's still alive. Happy to have him come here and talk to you if you want. He wrote a research paper on the first 100 miles of the upper Missouri River, specifically on Missouri River ferry boats. And he's got all these details in here of when they were established. And I've got some additional maps that I found in the Historical Society. And what it all shows conclusively, and by the way, I looked at tons and tons of old newspaper articles from Helena from around this period in the 1870s and 80s. And they all corroborate what Mr. Stoner said. And what he says is this: Blake's Ferry is down here. Blake's Ferry is down here at Beaver Creek, the mouth of Beaver Creek. And so what that 1885 petition established was Beaver Creek Road, not Red Hill Road. Red Hill Road was established according to the Daniothy petition in 1887. This road up north is apparently a user-created road. I have not found a shred of evidence that would confirm that this was ever established as a county road. Now, you're going to hear from Mr. Schmaus that I'm completely wrong on Beaver Creek Road, and he's going to show you other petitions and other things. I've looked at his other petition, and I've researched in great detail, and I can't find that there's one particular petition that looked to me like a good candidate to completely disprove my theory. I can't find any evidence that it was ever adopted by the county commissioners. There's another petition that talks about a very short segment of a road around Beaver Creek. It appears to be connecting the Beaver Creek Road or the ferry with another point that's a little farther south. But this appears to be the petition that establishes what we know as Beaver Creek Road that then ultimately goes west and connects with the highway. Keep in mind that the highway there now wasn't there then. What you had was a dirt track that basically corresponded to try and follow in the valley and the railroad. But there were a couple places where those roads deviated. There was one place where you had a Beaver Creek Helena Road and you had a Bozeman Helena Road, and they should have connected with each other much sooner and saved some road miles, but they didn't. And so that's why I think there's a reference in here at one point to connect with the Beaver Creek Helena Road, not the Bozeman Helena Highway, because they were actually slightly, not really parallel, but kind of going like this at angles towards each other. So what we have now is we do have maps, and we do apparently have some drawings showing the road that Mr. Schmaus is saying is the Daniothy, or maybe, I'm not sure what road he would call it. I call it Daniothy North just for convenience sake. But I have not found any petitions or any actual documents from the county saying that this is a county road. The newest stuff I gave you is that 1923 resolution. In 1923, Broadwater County gets this. They decide that they're going to basically do a roundup of roads that have been established by petition. And they list roads throughout the entire county. I looked at that in great detail. I cannot find this road or a road in that area of Township 9 North, Range 1 West, or Township North 9 North, Range 1 East that would correspond to this Daniothy North. So I think what you have is you have some drawings, and you have what is clearly a user-created road. I don't think it was ever established by the county commission. And you also have a practice of what was then Jefferson County being very diligent on tracking petitions and on appointing viewers and adopting roads. And they appear to be pretty well organized in terms of keeping all that documentation. There are a couple petitions out there, which I can talk about if we need to, where they were never granted. There's a petition hanging out there. There's one where there's even a viewer's report but I can't find a commission ordering it. So at a minimum, I think, based on the practice of Jefferson County at that time, you should expect to see a petition, viewer's report for that Daniothy North Road. I think the documents you have show a road in the south that's undisputed as a county road, and it also makes sense really with the whole historical record. So my recommendation is that you determine that there isn't sufficient evidence to declare this, what I would call Daniothy North, whatever you want to call it, this road going through Township 9 North, Range 1 West, Section 1, maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. It's the one that's on the map. I would recommend you declare that there's not sufficient evidence to declare it a county road, and we end this whole matter. And I can go into more detail than you even want to get into if you want to. And I do have this document. This is a binder from Mr. Schmaus, which I think I've relied on it extensively. A lot of what I've given you in my packets are duplicates, but there are some documents in here specifically dealing with Leffler Road that I didn't reduplicate in this because I thought that was a pretty well settled question. I would also ask maybe at some point let the public comment on this. I know you've gotten this letter from BLM. I've sent them these documents as well for them to review. I've given them to Mr. Cox, given them to a few other folks, and they're, like I said, we've got extra packets that are available if anyone wants them.
Joe?
Yes, sir. I called point of order because it appears that Mr. Swanson is challenging the board's May 21st decision of this year. Is that what you're doing, Mr. Swanson?
I'm asking them to make a decision today, Mr. Schmaltz.
But the decision was already made.
A decision was made, not the decision you've alleged in your lawsuit, and we're not going to talk about your lawsuit
I'm
today.
talking about my lawsuit, sir. I'd like to read the May 21st Commissioner's minutes on the record. Introduce myself for the camera. This is Joe Schmaus. Corey Swanson, County Attorney, and Joe Schmaus appeared to present information on the Dianthony Leffler roads. Old maps showing improved roads in the area with petitions that show one road is a county road, one goes through Cox property, one to the west of said property. Corey recommended the commissioners make a decision which would be most defensible. Corey and Nicole Brown, Community Development Coordinator and Planner, will coordinate a tour of the road and GPS mapping of said road, and BLM will be engaged prior to officially opening the road. Nicole said MCA stated that the county may maintain a county road. Daryl Fulkford asked Joe his expectations for the road. Joe stated it is not his intention to have the county build him a road. He wants the public access to the area. Commissioner Obert moved, based on the information provided, that Dianthony Road could be one of several routes. We support that it be the west route and GPS said road. Motion seconded by Commissioner Slifka and Carey. There was some confusion, I believe, by Mr. Swanson in regards to the board's decision. I asked Ms. Obert to clarify that in an email dated Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018, the day after the board's decision at 3:54 p.m. Ms. Obert writes, "Gentlemen, this email was addressed to myself, Mike Delger, Broadwater County Commissioners, and Ann Rouser, and Corey Swanson. For clarity, the motion I made yesterday, based on the information that Dianthony Road could be one of several routes, we support that it be the west road and GPS said road. This motion passed unanimously without opposing comment. We were advised by legal counsel yesterday," that would be Mr. Swanson, "that documentation showed there was a county road from the 1880s, possibly in quotations 87, named Dianthony and there were several routes and very vague legal descriptions. We could choose which route would be the county road. I suggested the western route as it would have the least impact on existing egg operations." Speaking of Mr. Cox. Hi, Cliff. So I believe there's a little bit of confusion here in regards to what Mr. Swanson is doing here. But again, in defense of the board's decision, Mr. Swanson states that he's missing a key component in this argument to establish or to defend the commissioner's decision. And that component would be a missing petition. So in Mr. Swanson's report that he wrote to the board, we have basically 3 roads and 2 petitions according to Mr. Swanson.
Well, that's not quite correct. I think there are some other
I'm talking-
petitions which weren't
Sir?
granted.
He had his time to speak.
I'll reserve my point of order.
I wrote a follow-up letter October 12th to the board in reference to 8 particular documents that are of the county record. Appended to that document was Exhibit A, the 1869 General Land Office map, which shows Upper Ferry and Middle Ferry Road. Exhibit B was Exhibit B is the missing petition. Exhibit B is the Edmonds Ferry Upper Road petition from 1884. If you please refer to that.
Did you send me a copy of this letter?
Gave it to the board.
Oh, okay. I don't think I have it.
So Exhibit B, as you'll see, is a certified copy of the official records of Jefferson County. This document is also recorded in Mr. Swanson's memo. I'll get that to it in a minute. But on September 3rd, 1884, the commissioners granted the prayer, Boulder, the petition says, Boulder, September 3rd, 1884, that the prayer of the petitioners for a road leading from Edmonds Ferry to be allowed by order of the board. The second page of that exhibit, or I guess it would be the third page with the petition, is that the board ordered viewers to go out and view that road, meeting at Edmonds on the 22nd of September 1884. So with this document, this makes the third petition for 3 separate, definitely different county roads. Different points of origin: Upper Ferry or Edmonds Ferry, 1884, Blake's Ferry, 1885, and Dianthony Road in 1887. Swanson states in his report that he's missing this document, but I would refer the commissioners to, give me a minute here, I believe it's his Exhibit 10 of his memorandum. It is Exhibit 10. Which are the Commissioners' proceedings relative to county roads transcribed from Jefferson County, delivered to this county on the 6th of June, 1898. Do you see that here? It's got black on the bottom of the page.
Here's getting closer, yeah, yeah.
So the first page of Exhibit 10 is the title of the document. You see here, Mike?
Yeah.
If you go,
Better go back one page.
there you go. So if you flip that page, Mr. Chairman, the second paragraph of that page, beginning September 4th, 1882, second paragraph states, "The prayer of the petitioners for the road leading from Edmonds Ferry be allowed by order of the board, September 3rd, 1884. This is the document that Mr. Swanson has stated to the board and this people in this room that doesn't exist. So again, we have 3 county roads, 1 petitioned in 1884. Mr. Chairman, Upper Ferry, Edmonds Ferry, 1884, Mr. Swanson also just stated that there was a short stretch of road in Beaver Creek adopted, but you can clearly see my exhibit B again is the petition for this Edmonds Ferry Road. And the petition states, to establish and lay out a public highway or county road leading on the most practical route from Edmonds Ferry on the Missouri River near the mouth of Beaver Creek. That gives us a point of origin. Edmonds Ferry was very close to the mouth of Beaver Creek in section 26. To a point on the Helena and Radersburg Road at or near the Spokane House. So what was adopted here wasn't a short stretch of road. It was literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7 miles of road. Because we know that the Spokane House was located in section 16 over here, and we're down here. He said there was a short stretch of road adopted. That was clearly, and if you reference that road at the time, the only map that we can go back in history and look at is the 1869 GLO, which shows, and I know you've looked at this before because that's the information that you relied on in your previous decision. The 1869 GLO shows the road from Upper Ferry, and it's identified as the road from Helena to Diamond City. Diamond City was in Confederate Gulch, so therefore that road had to have been the road which he speaks of in Beaver Creek. You made your previous decision based...
Which page is that?
It's page
What-
10 of
what
your...
you just read. Is it
Page
this?
10 of your...
Of this exhibit?
Yeah, right there. So again, you based your previous decision on this very same information I'm introducing. As you remember, Mike, we had a private session with Mr. Swanson early in May. You dismissed yourself. Commissioner Obert came in to take over for you. And at that meeting with Mr. Swanson, we sat down and I went over these petitions with you and said basically what I'm stating now. We have 3 roads, 3 petitions. The description of these petitions, Dianthony, Blake's Ferry, and Edmonds Ferry, all different times. We're looking at from 1884 to 87, 3 years, from 1885 to 87, 2 years. John and Julius Dianthony signed the petition for Blake's Ferry in 1885. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever why they would come back and petition that road when Mr. Swanson has said that that is the same road as Red Hill Road, so therefore it cannot be, as the board already determined, confused with Dianthony North Road, which he identifies as that. I'd like to go on to quote Mr. Swanson in his memorandum to the board. I state, as reported by Swanson, he fails to locate at page 10 of the September 21st memorandum. That's the memorandum that I just resorted to, and you are looking at Exhibit 10. Quote unquote, there does not appear to be another petition establishing Beaver Creek Road as the county road prior to 1887, if not the 1885 petition. He's speaking of the Blake's Ferry petition, because again, in his document, he did not have, nor did he research, he says he could not find, the Edmonds 1884 petition, so he's saying it has to be the 85 petition. Well, he's incorrect. At page 12 of his memorandum, again, he further states, I have been able to locate any other competing petitions that would explain the road, Dianthony or Red Hill, other than the arguments I have explained herein. So again, he's stating again, he has found nothing. Well, it's contained in his own document. Exhibit 10, page 2. So I would recommend that the board take no action on Mr. Swanson's request. I believe that Mr. Swanson has insulted this board, myself, the operation of this government, and I don't really appreciate him coming in and trying to fill your heads full of a bunch of BS. Because the documents speak for themselves, they're there, they are contained. And I could go on and on if you'd like me to go, because I would like to address this 1923 map, county map. But you know the arguments there already.
So Corey, did you have something else?
Well, I'd like to respond to my insulting all of America. Do you want to do the 1923 thing now, or do you want to come back after I talk about the other stuff?
Well, I previously addressed the board with that documentation.
The 23 resolution?
Yeah, they reviewed that prior to their May resolution, so I don't, unless the board wants to. I think the board does understand that a map officially recorded in the county and stamped by the county clerk is an official document of the county. Do they not? Mr. Chair?
What's that?
You do agree that maps that are recorded in the county and filed and stamped by the clerk and recorder are official documents of this county, correct?
I would say they would be,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Corey?
Well, it doesn't matter what the document, if the document was recorded. We had liens filed and recorded, stamped by John Wright. Doesn't mean they were lawful liens. We had a criminal case over that. Here's the issue. First, I want to address the impact of the May decision based on your decision today. Here's what the May's decision was. Number one, make a decision which route was most defensible. Okay? In fact, you instructed me to prepare a legal memo accordingly. In the course of preparing that legal memo was when I discovered that we had been relying on some erroneous information. We never got very far on that because Mr. Smouse sued us for not moving fast enough. And he dismissed that case. And then after I alerted him that I was going to give you a recommendation, in fact, I gave him my draft memo with all my reasoning, he sued us a second time. So the reality is you as the county commission are fully empowered to make the decision that today that is the right decision on this road. You also decided in May to order myself and Nicole Brown to GPS the route. And at the time, the GPS unit was broken, so they weren't able to do it. Now, ultimately, we did travel the route, and I know you traveled the route. And part of the issue is we couldn't locate the route. Third was, you never ordered that the road be opened. You never declared it a county road. To do that, you've got to have a legal description. You have to have coordinated with the landowner who's being affected, which would both be potentially Cox and McMaster and the BLM. And if you recall from that meeting, specifically, Mr. Schmaus said he was not going to demand that they immediately open gates so he could go on this so-called county road. Well, lo and behold, that's what he did the next day. And suddenly there were all these issues with BLM officials calling us saying, has the county declared this a county road? And no, you did not. The minutes from your decision are what matter. The email from Commissioner Obert is fine, but she wrote that email and then later voted to affirm the minutes that were done after that email. That is the record of the county's decision. Regardless of that meeting and that decision in May did not bind you to adopt and open a county road that didn't exist in 1887. You have the fully empowered to make the right decision today. Secondly, my whole issue of insulting the USA or whatever I've done, the issue of these petitions is what I specifically addressed in pages 10, 11, and 12 from my memo from 21 September. Now, Mr. Schmaus refers to this Exhibit 10, page 2, where it says the prayer of petitioners for a road leading from Edmondson's Ferry be allowed by order of the board. That's correct. They accepted the petition. That's as far as it got. Because then you look at okay, September 3rd, 1884, the commission adopted a petition. I'm looking at page 11 of my memo. Then, the same day, the commission appointed viewers to locate a road from Edmondson's Ferry to the Helena Bozeman Road. First thing we got to clear up, Edmondson Ferry, Blake's Ferry, Upper Ferry, and Beaver Creek Ferry are all the same ferry. It all depended on time. Well, read the documents from Stoner and from these historical newspaper articles that I've included here. They're all dealing with the same ferry. When let's drive this point home before we go on to these petitions. If you look then at the map and the report from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which Mr. Schmaus provided, which is somewhere around Exhibit 14, 14. So, the Secretary of War provides a report to Congress in 1893 on these ferries that are located on the Missouri River. Well, various things, various features. Mr. Schmaus, from his handwritten one that he gave me, he is saying that Pickering Ferry, which is at 204 miles from, I don't know where it's from. It's from Fort Benton, I believe. I'm not sure. Pickering Ferry is called the Upper Ferry. White Gulch and Blake's Ferry is called Middle Ferry. And then you've got Canyon Ferry. Here's the problem. If you look at this report and you look at a map of where all these different features, all these different creeks come in, you'll see a problem. The problem is that White's Gulch, the creek, comes in a different, it's out of order from this report. So White's Gulch and White's Ferry are two different things, okay? And if you look at, give you another example, Confederate Creek and Duck Creek, we all know where they are. If you put those on a map as to where they flow in, the map right behind you, where they flow into the Missouri and now Canyon Ferry, they are out of line with even Mr. Schmaus's theory on where these ferries are located. This document is what first alerted me that there was an error in his analysis on the ferries. I looked at this and I said, there's more ferries here. We're clearly missing them because these are out of order. And we know those streams didn't redirect themselves by 4 miles between 18, whatever year this is, 93 and now. The mouths of those streams. This is what led me to do more research on the ferries. And page 56 of Exhibit 15 is where it has detailed historical information on this ferry. Edmondson Ferry, Blake's Ferry, Upper Ferry, Beaver Creek Ferry. They're all the same ferry. And what's interesting about this is when you look at the records specifically in these petitions that we're talking about in 1884 and 1885, it fits it with the historical record. We started by calling it Edmondson Ferry. Well, guess what? After the petition was submitted in 1884, Edmondson sold the ferry and the land and moved away. And then later on, it's called Blake's Ferry because Blake took it over. But it's the same deal. It's the same location. So if you go to my memo.
Could I ask Cory just a quick question? Could you state for the record what the date of that document is?
What document?
The Secretary of War report?
Well, it says 1893 on the front of it.
1893. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So if you go to page 11, you'll see where he operated the ferry on behalf of a widow in probably end of 1885, 1886, based on, I mean, we're talking deep. I found a newspaper article and a report in which a hired man named Fisher got hired by Fisher, or by Blake. He ran the ferry for 7 years and ended in 1893, in which case he married Blake's daughter and moved to Beaverhead County. So that's the level of detail I've been looking at to try and confirm or deny this theory. So if you look at the bottom of page 11 and going into page 12 of my memo, the citizens in December 1885 presented this petition that we've referred to as the Blake's Ferry or Beaver Creek petition. And it's to establish points on the county road from Indian Creek to Spokane and to lay out Spokane House to the Lewis and Clark County line at or near the halfway house and establish a road from Blake's Ferry on the railroad to a place called Placer. Placer is basically across from where today's, I'm trying to figure out where this is.
McMaster's turnoff.
Yeah, it's basically where McMaster's turnoff is. Somewhere around there is Placer, okay? So the commission broke it into two parts. Look on page 12. It accepted the viewer's report for the road from Indian Creek to Lewis and Clark County line on June 11th, 1886, because they asked for a humongous thing that really needed to be broken into two roads. And then July 6, 1886, they established a road at Blake's Ferry between the Thompson and Beatty properties and moving to intersect the Helena-Bozeman County Road near Antelope Springs. That's a different location. So, I mean, we can go into this in great detail. And there were some minor adjustments to Beaver Creek in 1901, 1902. Then the Daniothy petition was filed March 4th, and they did not actually get a viewer's report till September. This is 1887. And then it adopted the Daniothy and the Red Hill roads on September 5th, 1887. The commission had these roads. So the commission was looking at the Daniothy Road and the Red Hill Road petition and the Beaver Creek Road petition, or Blake's Ferry Road petition, all at the exact same time. And they did them in sequence. They didn't even take the viewer's report from Daniothy until September, even though it was done sooner than that. They built them in sequence, and they built it as part of a master plan for commerce in the valley. Now you've got a road through the Blake's Ferry petition that establishes the Beaver Creek Road, and it was named a county road prior to the Red Hill Road. But it was done, they were doing it all at the same time. These commissioners were really smart how they looked at all these roads and they delayed one until they had the other one established. So that's the issue, is when you say they allowed, in 1884, they allowed this petition of these viewers on the Edmondson Ferry, and then they came back and appointed viewers for the Blake's Ferry, and then they broke it into two parts, Indian Creek and then Beaver Creek. That all started from that same petition in 1884, 1885, but they didn't adopt it until right before the Red Hill and Daniothy roads. They were looking at them all at the same time, and we would completely misinterpret this if we didn't understand which ferry was located at which location. And until I found this treatise that this guy had written and dug into the newspaper articles, which all confirmed this, we would have completely had the wrong ferry 5 miles in the wrong location. Then Mr. Schmautz's theory would all be correct. That's all I got on that. Well, I would say on the 1923 resolution. This road's not on that 1923 resolution. And there's got to be an explanation for that absence. The explanation is there's no county road there. And just because there's a hand-drawn route on some card or some map, and card we can't even find anymore, that doesn't mean anything. The other thing I would tell you to do is look at the latest stuff I sent you. It's going to be exhibits like 29, 30, 31. Yeah, this stuff is powerful stuff, all right? I'm going to end with this. So exhibit 29 is the 1923 resolution. Daniothy North is not on there. There's no road that would cover those areas. Exhibit 30A and 30B, these are detailed spreadsheets of road transactions, of everything, easements, changes, whatever. There's no road in Township 9 North, Range 1 East or West corresponding to the sections where this Daniothy Road supposedly existed. And you go to exhibit 31. 31, these are the cards we talked about, right? Where now we've got two versions and the originals are missing. But the version that I got from a U.S. Forest Service researcher a year before all this came up, a year before, shows in Township 9 North, Range 1 East, there's no road that would have to start in section 6 and then go west, and there's no corresponding notes on the bottom of that. Then you go to 9 North, Range 2 East, sorry, 1 West, I'm all messed up here. There's no road drawn, which would have to go from section 1, 11, 12. What you do see is you see handwritten, scribbly out a road in section 13, 14, 23, 24. And I thought, that's odd, because I didn't see that on the cards that Mr. Schmaus provided. So I went and looked it up, and sure enough, that area in 13, 14, 23, 24, that road was abandoned. And that's why some clerk, after 1945 or whenever that was done, went in and circled that and wrote no road. And those documents are also available if you want to look at it. Then finally, because the cards were not available, I found the full big drawing it's in the I don't know what you call this. It's in the big road book. It's exhibit 32.
It's a county road index for clarity.
There you go. And there is this tiny little dashed line in section 6 that would correspond to the road that Mr. Schmaus is indicating. And then, if you go to the next section, there is a hand-drawn route in section 1, 12, 11, 13, 14. And then guess what there also is? This section that is abandoned in 13, 14, 23, 24. What does that mean? What it means is, number one, this seems to be the only place where I've seen a record on a county what I would call an official county record showing a hand drawing for this route. But there's no documents associated with it. And on the opposite page of this is a very, very detailed listing of all the documents from today going back until really till 1865. And I looked through every single one of those documents, and there is nothing in any of those documents that corresponds to this line drawn in sections 1, 12, 11, 14, 13. Even if that was a county road, the section that you would need to traverse to get to it has been abandoned. Even if all this was a county road up there, there's no way to get to it. You mean better off flying a drone or coming in on a boat from Canyon Ferry Reservoir. And I've attached then Exhibit 33. This is another, just some more records reflecting Red Hill Road is indicated. So I'm telling you, I have devoted so much more time to this than I'm embarrassed to admit how much time I've spent on this, a lot. And to the neglect of certainly some other things that I would like to have done. But I started off pretty skeptical. Somewhere around May, these documents were looking like there was in fact a road up there. Then in the course of preparing a legal memo for you to defend an action if you want to declare a county road, all these discrepancies started popping up. All these things that didn't make sense. And the two things that didn't make sense. First was the ferry, and second was you'd have to change the legal description of that road in reference to Ed Durnan's residence in order for Mr. Schmaus's theory to be correct. But if you took the description as written, then it perfectly lined up with Red Hill Road. And based on that, I have been digging through boxes and drawers and books. I don't see sufficient evidence for this to be declared a county road. To the point where if, let's say you declared a county road and someone who has standing, and a lot of people would have standing, sued and challenged your decision, we would lose. I think a court would say there's not sufficient evidence for this to be declared a county road.
Mr. Chair. Oh, boy.
Where to begin, right?
Yeah, where to begin? I think I'll begin with Mr. Swanson's last statement. It's clear to me, and it should be clear to this board, the history of this matter before this board has been, we've had a previously filed memorandum where, as you remember, Mr. Swanson in that memorandum stated that this road was underwater. There's no denying that. Number two, for some reason, over the course from the beginning of this process, January through, I guess, today, it seems that Mr. Swanson has come onto the defense rather than be an advocate for the county, which he's required to do, and be their counsel. He's introduced a bunch of documents here, and his last statement says, if somebody filed a lawsuit against us over this, we would lose. So I would revert back to your previous decision, where Ms. Obert did clarify in the road in the quote unquote county road is the road, Dianthony Road, in that clarification email. Again, Mr. Swanson is pretty good about confusing documents. He's obviously as confused about these documents as he was in his prior memo, resorting back to his just most recent statement. All of these, he was referring to all three of these roads, quote unquote, all at the same time. It wasn't at the same time. We're talking 1884, 1885, and 1887. The maps clearly show, as you've seen these 100 times now since January, 1, 2, 3 county roads. We have 3 petitions that explain those county roads. We have a document that was prepared by a registered land surveyor that has his seal and signature. And again, it doesn't show Beaver Creek Road because at that time, because we established the road that was underwater is underwater at Canyon Ferry. Beaver Creek Road, which is again where it pretty much is today, is not shown on this. So that would be 1, 2, 3. We've had Mildred Land Services, a registered title clerk, if you will, for a better reference to his title. And then we go back to what Mr. Swanson relies highly on is this Stoner report. And being that I'm from Broadwater County, I actually know who that is, and I'm sure all of you do. The Stoner report, and no disrespect to Mr. Stoner, but he got a few things wrong, and I'll show you what exactly he got wrong. But he does state at page 14 of his report, which is recorded in Mr. Swanson's memorandum, quote unquote, as a rule, when ownership of a ferry boat changed, then so did the name. Now, Mr. Swanson relies highly on the fact that Blake's Ferry ended up, I'll use the word ended up, but Blake's Ferry is, and Edmonds Ferry, those two names are synonymous because Mr. Stoner reports, and there are some other references to Blake's Ferry being at the location of Edmonds Ferry. But back to quoting Mr. Stoner, as a rule, when ownership of a ferry boat changed, then so did the name. If you look at my most recent letter to the board, which was dated the 12th of October, and there was a series of exhibits, eight truths in defense of the commissioner's decision. You go to number 6, which is exhibit F of there, and that is an October 2nd, 1888, emphasis October 2nd, 1888, deed from Edmonds Ferry, Upper Ferry, Tabitha A. Duff, grantor, John M. Blake, grantee, recorded in Book 10 at page 237 of the records of Broadwater County. So again, we're speaking and agreeing with Mr. Stoner to some extent in his report. Ferry boats' names didn't change until there was a new owner. So this indicates to me that the reference, and it's an obvious reference from Mr. Stoner and Mr. Swanson's confusion over the matter. I don't dispute that Blake's Ferry was not known as, or Edmonds, the location of Upper Ferry that's shown on the 1869 GLO, was confused with the name Blake's Ferry, but that wasn't until after 1888 or shortly there before. It couldn't have been in 1885. Most definitely, because there's no historical documentation that shows anything before July 6, 1887, and that reference is also recorded in Mr. Swanson's memorandum, his Exhibit 10. And that's not the Blake's Ferry Road at all. That reference, I can find it here.